There's one more type of special placeholder that we can use, and that's what we're going to cover in our next example. So I mentioned, as an example of using a parameter, going to a node slash and then the node ID slash edit page. And doing so will allow you to edit a node. But what's happening there isn't the use of a simple placeholder like we just used. Instead, it's a particular type of placeholder that allows us to pass not just the parameter as an argument to the callback function, but a fully loaded object that can be used in the callback function itself. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that works. Jump to your module directory, and in your steps folder, go ahead and open up the 7th step, which is called object loading. Go ahead and copy the entire code and paste it over all of the code that's currently in your pages.module file and save it. Okay, let's scroll up to the top here. We have our hook menu function, and if we scroll down to the bottom of it, we'll see a new item here. And the path is pages slash object slash, and then we see our wildcard, but instead of it just being a wildcard by itself, it has a bit of a string attached to the right of it. So this is wildcard pages underscore object. Now, what this will do is access the callback function that we've defined for this path, but if we pass this item, this wildcard pages object item, as an argument, what it will do is look for a special function called pages underscore object underscore load. So whatever we pass as the string here, it will look for a function called that plus an underscore load. And then it will grab whatever that function returns and pass it as the parameter to the callback function. And just like in our placeholder example, we're passing this as an argument through the page arguments parameter. And the number here corresponds to its position in the path. So pages would be at a 0 position. We always start at 0. Object would be at 1. And then our third argument would be at 2. So we're passing it the number 2. And just like with our placeholder example, this 2 will be replaced by the wildcard. In this case, it will be replaced by the wildcard passing through the load function that's assigned to it. So let's go ahead and take a look at this load function. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the page where we've added some new code. We've added 3 additional functions to this file right here. And we have our pages underscore object load here, and it's being passed our wildcard item, which is going to be an ID. Typically, this ID would correspond to an item in the database, and this load function would be processing it, converting it into an object that can then be used by a page callback, or more often, multiple page callbacks. But in this example, what we're doing is just taking a simple number and doing a little processing on it for an example. So what we're doing is returning an array from this function, and we're passing the ID straight through as an ID item in the array, and then we're taking that ID and multiplying it by 2, and giving that the times 2 key. And then we're just passing some additional information as a string. Then if we scroll down here to the pages object underscore page function, we'll see that it's being passed a parameter called object. In our previous example, when we talked about placeholders, the placeholder got passed directly as a parameter to this function. In this case, because we've used a very special placeholder, it's being passed to the load function up here, and then the return value from that is then being returned as the parameter to the callback function. And what we're doing in the callback function itself is very simple. We're just creating a simple build array that has a single item in it. We're giving it the type of markup, saying that this is going to be some HTML. And then the markup parameter just contains some text with a couple of placeholders, including the ID, so the placeholder that we're using, and then the times 2 to demonstrate that we're grabbing values from this pages object's load function. And then we're replacing these placeholders with the object itself. So object ID, and then the times 2 placeholder is being replaced by the times 2 item in the object. Okay, Go ahead and make sure that your module page is saved and jump back to the browser. And go ahead and clear your caches to make sure that the new page item gets registered. I'm going to jump back to the code so we can copy the path to this new menu item, pages/object, and then / our placeholder. And I'm going to paste that in the address bar of the browser. I'm then going to replace our placeholder with a number here. Just give it the number 10 and hit enter to load it. Okay. So now we see the text here is the ID is 10 and that times 2 is 20. So we know, because this simple multiplication is happening on our load function, that our object is being passed as the parameter to our callback function. Now with this particular menu item, I'm going to jump back to our code here. We didn't define a type parameter for it. So above we did for a couple of our examples here and here, but when we don't define a type, it defaults to a default type. And this default type typically registers a menu item for the callback function. So in addition to creating a page, we also get a menu item that's registered with the menu system. But the problem with a path that requires a placeholder is that we don't know exactly what that default page is supposed to display. What we can do is create a companion function to this item that supplies a default argument. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to the bottom of our file here, and we have this third function that we haven't talked about yet. What it is the name of our placeholder, which is whatever comes after the percentage sign or the wildcard sign inside of our path when we register the menu item, plus _to_arg. And what this does is take the argument and allows us to modify it in some way. In this case, what we're doing is checking for an empty argument and giving it a value of 42. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this type of syntax, what we're using is a ternary operator. So we're just using this simple structure with a question mark and a colon to separate the statement here from the value if the statement returns yes to the value if it returns false. So we're saying that in the case that this ID doesn't exist, we're going to give it a value of 42. So if we jump back to the browser, we'll see that we have a menu item registered here for our object page. And if you look at the address, which will show up down here in the lower left-hand corner when we hover over the item, that it has the default value of 42. So when we click this, it will load the page with 42 as a placeholder here. And then we have our processing going on the page itself.